Good evening. Welcome to the Raymond Select Board Workshop for Tuesday, the 8th of March, 2016. We are here to have a workshop. We will go through this for the next hour. We will break and then start our official Select Board meeting at 7-ish, depending on timing. One of the things I will let everyone know is that because the Select Board starts at 7, as we get closer to 7, I would expect the door to open and close quite a bit. We are expecting quite a large turnout for tonight's Select Board meeting. So don't be surprised if it gets a little noisy in here just before 7. With that, Don, I'll turn it over to you to introduce our guest speaker.
Yes, we have Don Tyler, and he is the Principal and Executive Vice President of Human Resource Partners, LLP of Harpswell, Maine. He was selected to do a compensation pay study for the town after competitive interviews and proposals were sought from a number of vendors. So there was an interview panel. I believe Joe was on that panel, Rolf and Nancy. And so we're very pleased with his selection. He's been working over the past several months on his report. This evening he is going to give you a very brief overview of the draft report and take questions from you about it.
Okay, thank you, Don, and good evening. I'm happy to be here. And what I'd like to do is, as Don indicated, go over what I call the...
Can you pull the mic a little closer
Sure.
to you or scoot up? They should slide a little bit, but if you can.
How's that, a little better? Yes. To go over the highlights of the report and entertain any questions that you might have. There's a lot of information that was given to you, and I'm sure we're not going to cover all of that this evening. But I think if we hit on the highlights, have an opportunity for questions and comments. This is a draft document, as Don mentioned earlier, subject to some changes and revisions. But I feel very comfortable with the results that I'm presenting to you. I can just basically very quickly take you through the process and the methodology that we followed to conduct this study. It's what I refer to as a compensation and classification study, which means basically that we're doing two things. One is to make sure that all of the town positions are evaluated in a very objective, I don't use the word scientific, but we can at least be objective about evaluating jobs and not individuals or performance. So part of this was to put a grade level beside each position. And for me to do that, I sought input from all of the town employees who were included in the study, and I think there were about 18 of them, give or take, Don, altogether. And they were asked to fill out a questionnaire, which was about a 4 or 5 page document, asking only for job-related information. What do you do? What are the most difficult parts of the job? What are your major responsibilities? Do you supervise other people? What kind of working conditions are you working under? All of these elements go into evaluating a position. And in your handouts there is a document called a position evaluation plan, which I won't go over this evening, but that's the document that I used to actually rank the positions and assign a grade level to each position. So we'll go through that in just a moment. So the first part of the study was what I would call the internal equity piece, to make sure that the jobs as I've recommended them, the grade levels, kind of make sense to the organization and they fall into grade levels. So I'm starting at the town manager position in the top grade level. I think that's 11 on down through to the least complex job, which I can't recall what that is right now, but it's either in a grade 3 or 4, something like that. So the other jobs fall somewhere in between. And hopefully when you look at that, you'll say, makes sense to me overall. There may be a little bit of tweaking that needs to be done to that, but we can adjust that later. So that's the internal piece. The second part of the study involved a pretty comprehensive survey of not only pay, but we did a custom benefit survey for the town too. because I think it's important to look not just at pay, because benefits these days, as I'm sure you know, many of you are businessmen, I hear, and you know the cost of benefits. I'm a business owner as well, and some of those costs have been skyrocketing. So it's important to get a handle on how does the benefit package compare with the market. And I did a lot of thinking about what the market should be, and had some discussions with Don. We had an orientation meeting, a kickoff meeting with staff at the beginning of the project, and it solicited a little bit of input from some of the staff as to what are the comparable communities that from which the town draws to recruit people, and if you have turnover, where might they go? What other communities might you lose people to? And so I came up with a list. I also looked at there was a special task force, which perhaps some of you were members of that last year. I can't remember who was on it, but I looked at those communities and pulled out most of them, I think, but I also opted to go with a few others. And we asked 11 communities to participate in this project. And we had an excellent response rate, thanks in a big part to Don Willard, who helped make a few phone calls for us to get a couple of these stragglers that didn't participate in the first go-around of the survey. So the only one we did not have participate, and we tried many times, we sent out a written survey, which was very custom tailored to Raymond's positions and pay and benefits, and included a little job description of each position. And the only one that opted not to participate, perhaps because of timing or whatever reason, was, I think, the town of Buxton. So we had 10 of 11, which is a really great participation rate. I was pleased with the data. And I felt the communities we looked at was a good, reasonable sample. Some of them are larger than Raymond, some are smaller, but they're all what I would call proximate to Raymond. And one of the big drivers for me is as far as market and commuting distance. And most of your jobs, I think, would be filled within a half-hour commute to 3/4 of an hour commute. So that's kind of the area I was trying to look at when we were coming up with comparables. So we got a lot of good data. We had a lot of good fringe benefit or benefit practices information as well, and we'll go through a couple of pages on that. So if that's okay with you, why don't we get right into the kind of the nitty-gritty? Is that what you'd like me to do?
Did you share this, when the other towns participated, did you share the cumulative information with them?
Yes.
Right.
It was in an aggregate form.
Right.
So they did, it's
So they
basically an
benefited.
enticement to, thanks for participating in
Yeah.
the survey, because it does take time.
Right.
And we did promise that up front in a letter to them,
Right.
so we've done that. And got some good feedback, I think, they were glad they participated because the data was useful to them.
So Don, before you go any further, just I want to make sure that you have a chance to know who's who. If we could just introduce ourselves to Don, starting with you, Teresa, in case he can't read your name tag.
I'm Teresa Sadak.
Joe Bruno, we met
Yes, we did.
when we interviewed.
Yep,
Sam Gifford.
I see.
And Lonnie Taylor is unable to make it. He had a scheduling conflict
Okay.
from way back, so he would be our 5th member. Also, Don did touch on a community group that did a compensation study informally, and it was that informal survey that we did, finished about 18 months ago, that then led us to deciding to go into a more professional advice stage rather than trying to tackle this internally. So I just wanted to finish the history for folks who are watching. So thank you, Don. Go ahead.
Good. I did read the report, and I thought it was quite comprehensive, and it's often something that's why I'm in business, I guess, one thing a consultant can do perhaps is be objective when you're looking at the data, make some decisions as to what should be included, what not. And I've done these types of studies for a long time, so that's helpful as well. It sounds easy to do, but there's a lot of nuances in there that you need to make some decisions that hopefully it all comes together into a good packet. Why don't we head to I'm following your table of contents here. Why don't we go to the position evaluations, on page 26, proposed grade levels. And this is the hierarchy of jobs that I saw as I was looking at the questionnaires people had filled out, looking at the position evaluation tool that I use to evaluate. This is called a point factor system of job evaluation. All these numbers mean something. There's a definitive statement beside every single number that's here that will equate to the evaluation. The numbers are added up, the points are added, and it equates to a grade level. I should point out there was one minor error because of a lot of drafts and cutting and pasting there, which I will send a report that's corrected. There were two positions which I had in grade level 6 that really are grade level 5, and it's a minor point. That's been corrected, and you can get that. I can send that to you tomorrow. But this is a hierarchy of jobs ranging from the top position in grade 11 down to the least complex jobs in grade 4. Some work that I do, we put in occasionally grades 3, 2, and 1, because there are some positions that do fall in a grade 1, but there just weren't any at this organization. You only had basically 14 different jobs, so you don't have a separate grade level for each position. Some tend to fall into the same grade level. Doesn't mean they're identical, but it means they're comparable based on the evaluation. So that's the internal piece. And then what we did was to put together the results of the salary survey for you, and I just want to take you through a couple of columns there in case you might have some questions about what does it mean.
What page is that, Don?
That is on page 28,
28.
recommended salary structure.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
27.
The title
Page
says
27.
the title says recommended salary structure on the top of the page, correct?
No, analysis
No,
of
it
salary
says
survey.
analysis of salary survey
It's
data.
right after the last one you just did.
Thank you.
That's 27.
Why is everything broken down on a per hour basis and not, yearly salary?
I do the conversion later, and you'll see that.
Okay.
The reason I do the hourly is because I've been caught a couple of times that people will report an annual salary, but it might be a part-time job or a three-quarter-time job. So I try to get it down to the least common denominator and to make sure we're comparing an apple with an apple. So this, the data here is presented hourly, but on the structure it will be annual and hourly, so you can see that. The columns are pretty self-explanatory. We have the first column indicating the position title, how many responses to that job did we receive. Keep in mind the survey sample was 10. The average actual pay, that's pretty much the only data that we got. There were some large communities and many other organizations have ranges for their jobs. They have a range minimum, midpoint max, but in this sample, I think only a couple of communities actually had formal pay ranges. So we collected primarily what are you actually paying for the work. And then we put beside the town of Raymond's actual pay, and we did a quick computation, percent of the actual to the average. And anything that would be 100%, for example, means that the Raymond pay is right at the going rate, the market rate. Anything above 100 would be indicative of it being that percent above the market rate. And you would expect to see some over 100 percentages for those who have been with the organization a long time, perhaps very senior employees. Doesn't mean they're overpaid. Please don't make that misassumption. So you can see that the percentages fairly consistent. I like to see numbers like this. A lot of work that I do, I see numbers in the 80s and the 70s, a lot of them, which means that they have a real pay issue. But here, I would say your actual pay for most positions is good. There are a couple of instances where those ratios are lower, and they're on the second page. And I don't know, the two I would highlight would be in fire and EMS, and I don't know if those are a surprise to you or not, but they are on the low side.
We're having an issue, I mean, we had an issue last year with the fire chief, whether he's an hourly employee or should he become a salaried employee. He chose to stay hourly,
Oh,
and so I think that kind of skews this off a little bit,
mm-hmm.
because
Is he getting overtime?
I'm assuming he is, I have
Yes.
no
Yeah.
idea.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's why he probably prefers to stay hourly.
And everybody else that you're doing on here then is salary then, is what it
Most of
is.
them were. I can't say all of them were. I don't have that in front of me right now, but
Okay.
fire chiefs usually are.
So, Don, if you just allow me just a sec. One of the things I asked Don and staff to do was figure out a pay for chief at his hourly plus his, so that when we have a discussion after this presentation, we can plug it in as to where we are gonna set his salary, or Don is gonna set his salary. So I didn't wanna muddy the waters by giving the information to Don after the fact when this was already put
I
together.
mean, we must have a history of
We-
W-2 forms for
Correct.
the last 3 or 4 years.
Correct, and Dawn actually got the numbers, or Nancy got the numbers, or somebody gave the numbers, so I actually have them.
Yeah.
And that'll be a discussion to have after we,
Okay.
after we do this. Thank you, Don.
Okay, you're welcome. Any other questions on the survey data? I'm happy to answer any questions you might have later. You can send me an email, give me a call, my information's there. I'm happy to respond. The next handout or document we'll go to is the recommended salary structure, which is on page 28. And this puts the positions, based on the prior document, the position evaluations, into a salary structure. So the structure, here we go with hourly as well as annual in this case. And the annual is based on 40 hours a week, 2,080 a year. And what we did here was to provide a range minimum and a range maximum. And you'll see that I've put in, I'm not saying you have to have them, but a lot of public sector organizations do have a step pay plan. And I know we'll talk about that in a few moments, about whether you want to do that. But this is kind of a compromise plan. A lot of municipals will go with steps from the minimum all the way to the top. You might have 20 steps in the pay plan, depending on how big the steps are. This plan here recommends a 2% step, and the intervals would be 1 year typically. And we start the steps up at the midpoint of the range, so it's kind of a hybrid system where you'd have steps going up to the midpoint. And part of the philosophy of that approach is to reward employees who are just new to the organization, give them an opportunity for increases based on time as well as performance. And those who are at the midpoint or above are theoretically at the going rate, the market rate, and perhaps their pay should be more closely tied to a merit-based program. This is what we see a lot, and I do private sector work as well, for-profit, and you don't see steps typically in that environment, as I'm sure you know. You'll see a minimum, a midpoint, and a maximum, and your pay is based on solely your performance, based on quantitative measures. Public sector, it's very difficult to do that. So this is a modified approach. 2% step seems to be in line with what I've developed before and what other communities seem to offer. Sometimes it's 3%. It can vary anywhere from 2 to 3.5%, basically.
But
as far
then
as
when you
steps go.
get to step 8 to the maximum, it's much more than 2%.
there's a big gap there. And
Right.
it's based solely, it would be about I'm gonna take a guess and say 12% more.
Right.
But that could be, that's how much you got to play with, so to speak. And if somebody's doing an exceptional job and they're at the maximum or above, then they're just doing gangbuster work, they're exceeding performance standards, they might get more than a 2-3% increase. But it needs to average out at some point. You can't give everybody the top of
Right.
the scale all the time. So that's how the program would work. So I think it's a good tool that whenever Don or anyone has an opening in the organization, they'll have a range that they can quote to applicants, because that's usually the first thing they want to know is, well, what's the range for the job and where can I go here with the town? So this is something you'd be able to identify and let people know. And you can hire within the range. You don't have to hire people at step one if they've got real good experience and background, or if the market's really tight, like IT jobs and other, you tend to have to move up into the range for those types of jobs. Or experienced people, you might bring them in at the midpoint. And in some extreme cases, even more than that. So that's what the salary structure would look like, and it is based upon the survey data that we collected and analyzed. I try to tie the actual pay somewhere around the midpoint of the range, so you got room to grow, beyond what the market rate is at the present time. Any other questions, or hope I'm not going too fast for you? Why don't we head over to the benefits? That would be page 30. You've probably, excuse me, have you all had a chance to look this over, at least briefly? Okay. We also did a, excuse me, pretty comprehensive look at the typical fringe benefit practices that are out there. And there's some general information that's kind of interesting I just wanted to highlight with you. We looked at what the most recent salary increase was for the prior fiscal year. Here at Raymond, it was 1.4% for department heads, 2% for hourly. And that ties in fairly well with what the survey sample reported, 1.7 to 3%, with an average of about 2.3. So you're, fairly close there. We also try to get an idea of what are you going to do this year. And a lot of folks, because of the timing of the survey, really weren't sure. They'll continue with, my guess would be in the very close to the numbers that they saw last time, or did last time. We'll know more as time goes on with that. We also asked for population. I'm sure you know the population here jumps up significantly. Don't need to tell you that. In some other communities that does happen as well, but in some it's pretty stable. I live in a community that jumps up quite a bit as well, and I'm happy after the foliage season is over, so get back to normal. We also looked at things like mill rate and number of employees, and I noticed your mill rate. I think you ought to be proud of that. It's a very low rate in comparison. It was excellent. The benefits, overall, I'll give you a summary, my take on it. I think you have a very good fringe benefit program here at the town. It compares at least as favorable, or in some cases more so, than what the survey group responded to on average. I think your health insurance contributions, percentage employer contributions is great. You don't have as many options as other communities might have with plans. but the employer contribution is very good. Some of the things that, and your dental insurance plan is also quite, you pay a little bit more than what the other communities do. Some of the things that may be a little on the, I call it consideration, maybe for the future, is things you might want to look at in terms of your benefit package that might be a little bit below the market rate. And some of them are not significant at all, and I'm not necessarily agreeing with the first one about negotiating vacation for certain employees. Sometimes that does happen. Other communities do it in order, usually for the top level positions, not every position, but the top level. The amount of sick leave at 60 days seems like a pretty good amount to me, but other communities do more.
You mean carryover?
Carryover, yeah. Yeah. It seems like a pretty good number.
Not something you see in the private
No, you
world.
certainly don't. And you don't get paid for your sick time in the private sector either, but community here in the public sector, you do that. Which is it's quite common, been a long-term practice. You don't offer a short-term disability plan, but you have a really good sick leave, earned sick leave plan, so you really don't need to have it.
Well, we actually have talked about short-term disability because it's cheap and covers you from day one.
Yep.
So it's not an expense, a real big expense for the town, and it would protect a lot of employees.
Yep.
So,
Some do have it, so you might want to consider that, at
Right.
least look into it. You don't really have a formal tuition reimbursement program. I believe the response was that you will pay for certain things like seminars and workshops, but you don't have a formal tuition assistance plan. And a lot of communities do have that. And many of them will pay just for degree-related, job-related courses. Other are a little more liberal. They will pay for a degree-related course. It may not be job-related, but in order to get the degree, you need to take it. And that can be a good way of helping to retain some people. I worked for a bank in a prior life, and they had a great tuition assistance program, and a lot of the bankers there had their master's degrees paid for, and it was a way to retain them, basically. It was a good way to get some education. It's not necessarily all paid. There's a portion that could be paid, and that might be something you'd want to look at. Not saying you need to do it, but you consider it. And other communities offer, not a lot, but there's some work-life activities that they offer. And what does that really mean? We're talking about employee recognition dinners or appreciation events. A wellness program is another one. Employee assistance plan, which can be a good benefit for employees. They don't necessarily cost a lot, and those are all confidential. Safety training is another one. So you may want to consider those. They're not critical or vital issues, but we just point them out to you as something to think about.
Some of these ones, as far as like if it's a big, I'm gonna use my husband, he works a Ryder, they do ones for safety. But something, I guess, in this kind of field, I guess I don't see that as much, but it would be something similar to what people do here then, correct? Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Sometimes there's OSHA training that, well, Don would know better than I.
We do that, actually, and
You
we're
do?
going to do a lot more of that in the coming year's budget, but we do the safety training, more so in the public safety and public works departments, less so in administration, but we have a new initiative that hopefully will be approved, and we'll be doing more of that.
Mhm. Okay. that is essentially it for the, what I would call the pay and the benefits piece. And I'd welcome any questions or anything that you might want to bring up today or later. I apologize, my voice is starting to fade here. The other piece that I wanted to look at, or I was requested to look at, was the, now that you have ranges together for a formal pay plan, how are you going to reward people, pay them? A lot of organizations, public sector organizations, will put together a one based on time, and that's what the STEP program is. And typically they say they have an evaluation program, employee evaluation, but when you really get into it, everybody gets the same evaluation basically, and they all wind up with the same percent. That's typically what a lot of municipals do. There are some that will have more of a distinction in pay when there's a true difference in responsibility. And that's where you get into the merit component. And I've worked with a couple of communities, not a lot. These programs are not easy to successfully implement in the public sector for a variety of reasons. Sometimes you don't have budgets that are really meaningful, that you can have a significant number of merit pool dollars to put to the program. And when you're making rewards based on performance, and a top performer gets 2.1%, and someone who's barely meeting expectations gets a 1.8, it's not a real, you're making a distinction without a real difference there. Where there should be a larger difference, I guess is what I'm saying. And plus, it's public sector, everybody can find out or knows what everybody else is making, and that information can quickly get out there, and sometimes it does cause some issues. But on the positive side, it can really foster an atmosphere that Raymond is one that pays for performance. And I put together some, I think, pretty good forums that would help the town actually evaluate employees and put them into one of three categories. One would be those who would be your real stellar walk-on-water employees, those who consistently exceed expectations, and this would all be documented.
And this would be done by the supervisors or the town manager?
Yes.
Right? The
It would.
select board is completely out of that.
I'm glad to hear you say that. They should be.
Because we wouldn't know.
Well, I mean, no, it's not our role.
Yep.
And I just-
it's not, yeah.
Your role would be to come in and set what the merit budget ought to be for the coming year, and that can change every year, and that's part of the program too. It's not a fixed thing going forward year after year. You got to look at what you have available and that sort of thing. So the three levels of performance, most people are going to meet expectations, I would say. If you have a lot of long-term employees, I'm sure they wouldn't be here if they weren't doing their job, generally speaking. So most are going to be in the meets expectations. You may be skewed a little bit higher towards the exceeds because of your employee population. You may have a few that aren't meeting expectations, and these are people who may be new to the job, or they're on a performance plan that they're having a little trouble and working with them to get them so they're meeting expectations. So those would be the three levels, and the documents I provided would, I think, help place people into those groups. So the employee participates in the evaluation. They could even do a self-evaluation, so you can bring their evaluation to the meeting and see how far off you are, which makes for an interesting discussion sometimes. But there are 4 training documents that I didn't include in the package, which Don has, which I would provide to managers, basically, your department heads, on how do you do these things? How do you evaluate people? What are some of the pitfalls? And so I would spend probably an hour or so with the group, Don included, on how to do this and get the program up and running.
One of the things you find in a small organization, people are afraid to be honest on evaluations.
Yeah.
Are you gonna go over that of, you know, if you're not honest in an evaluation, it's not good for you or the employee?
Yeah. That, if you're not honest, the program's gonna fall flat on its
Right,
face.
if you just sit there and everybody meets expectations
Yep.
and everybody gets a raise,
Yeah, the manager wants to get it done quickly, so
Right.
check off, meets expectations,
Yeah.
done, get it all done.
right,
But easy to say, but it's difficult to implement, and training is the key. And managers, I think, should be held partly accountable for how well they do in their evaluations of their staff. And one of the worst things that can happen is if you've got a really tough, you know, like in college or high school, you got a tough marker over here where it's impossible to get an A from the professor or teacher. And then you got this over here, everybody's getting Bs and As, and the level of performance is the same, basically, so. We try to level that out.
You have a question?
Oh, it was back long. I was just gonna say that I envisioned, of course, that the department heads would do the individuals within their departments.
Yep.
So I'd charge them with that.
Yep,
And, well, that's how it is now, but with the new format and, you know, more autonomy within the system to do that, and then I would do the department heads.
yep. That's how it generally works. And
Right,
if
and
there
then
are,
we would do you.
right.
yes. And I'd have forms for you as well. Yep,
Don, one of the things, as I was reading over this, when I got to this point, which, you know, speaks to training, you know, because you're taking a group of individuals who, if they have worked in the municipal field all their careers, haven't learned how to do this or had to do this when it meant something different, as opposed to just, there's a review to get your job to be better, but then the review, if it comes with money, changes the stakes.
yep,
One of the reasons I like what's been presented here is with your ranges, if there's a policy within a range of job description, even if you exceed your job description, if you're at the top of your scale, then it makes the decision easier because if you're at the top of the scale and the scale doesn't move, you're not getting a raise
right,
unless there is a merit component that you went way above and beyond. So a two-tiered system with some steps to a range to merit allows the definition to be known by all the players ahead of time.
exactly.
And so hopefully your review process is easier. Much like in the private sector, if you get to the top of a range and your job doesn't change, if you know going in, that's the range we pay in town, your choice is to continue to do your job well or seek employment elsewhere
Right,
until the range changes.
yep,
And part of what you suggested here is that the range has to be evaluated from time to time as the market changes.
yep,
So taking all the tools together, I can see how there's still training needed, but hopefully that helps all involved.
yep. The training is the key here, and I would make sure, as Don indicated, that the managers are there, department heads, that they feel comfortable with the process, and what are some of the pitfalls that can happen, and I have a little segment in the training manual about that. There are several things you need to watch out for when you got to prepare for the evaluation. Don't wait till the last minute. There's a whole bunch of things that we can do to make this process a little bit easier, and try to make it as objective as possible and to substantiate what you're checking off with something in writing and not just a box. That you need to substantiate it. And if somebody's fallen short, you need to work out a plan to get people up to speed. You set goals for the coming year. I'm sure you do that with Dawn, and you can do 3 or 4 goals for the coming year, things that are really important that need to happen, not only for the town manager, but for Director of Public Works, Fire, the office folks, the treasurer, finance. They all have things that need to happen that are different every year, probably. And the other thing that, I don't know whether you saw it or not, I put it in there. It's the very last exhibit, and that would be the organizational standards. You may not want to consider this, or you may. Part of other programs that I've developed for clients have included not only what are the performance standards for the individual or for the department, but this is what are the things that the town of Raymond really values, what we call the organizational performance standards. And I pulled out some that you may not want to have in there, you may not want to have any of them in there, but there are things like, and I'll just review the highlights: organizational perspective, an understanding of how the individual job performance advances the town's mission, respectful behavior and confidentiality. I think that's an important one. And maybe that is a value of yours already, but here it is spelled out. Teamwork is another one that in some organizations that's vital to the success of the organization. Others it's not quite as important, but I put it in there as a possibility. I think it's important. Skill and ability, obviously, you need to continue honing the skills, seeking assistance when necessary. Knowledge of community, I think that's one that would be important as an organizational standards as well. Maintaining positive relationships with the community. So these can be part of the evaluation. Some organizations will make them actually part of whether you get a raise or what size raise you get. So you need to at least meet the expectations here in probably all of the areas for organizational standards, I would think. Unless there's a training involved situation, you're new to the job, so maybe it perhaps does not meet, might still warrant consideration for a raise. So, do you have any thoughts on organizational standards, interest, or if you're not, that's no problem at all. I wanted to put them out there for you.
I think these are great, because
Yeah,
what
you
happens
covered
is
them
it
really
builds awful
completely.
for them, and if there's something more that they want to add on to this list, they can build from it too, as department heads and the town manager. I think they're great.
Okay, good, thank you.
Questions on the presentation?
I thought it was a very well done
A
job.
lot of information, good
A lot
job.
Oh,
of
thank you.
good
Yeah.
information. I hope we're not scaring employees when they look at this thing, because they're not used to something like this getting done. This isn't how government usually works.
Yeah.
It's usually, here's your raise, see you later. We have very dedicated employees, we have very good employees, and then most of them are very long-term employees, which tells you that I think there's a lot of good happening in Raymond. I thought our scale was right where it needs to be. I don't think we need to give everyone a raise to get them to that 100%, just like I don't think we need to cut salaries.
Right.
Incrementally, we can get people where they need to be.
Over time, sure.
Over time.
Mhm.
Really loved the report. Thought it was very well done.
Extremely.
Provided a lot of good insight. And when do you plan on starting the training?
Well,
Don't we have to accept it first?
I mean, okay.
I think Joe just made a motion there.
let me know if it's accepted, and then we'll get back, and Don and I will work out a...
I guess we can't vote, it's a workshop, Sam.
Right.
So I guess if I would rephrase your question for a sec, how do you implement something like this? I mean, if you had advice for us.
I mean, I don't think we can do it for this budget season. I think this is a next year, as of July 1st, we're starting this. You start giving people evaluations now for next year. I just don't think we have the time to implement this for this budget
I
cycle.
think we have to process it, and I think all the department heads have to process it, and I think it's great. Now we've got something to go off of, so now if we take do this year
Mhm.
to lead into next year, we can put it into our budget. And we can also, like, say, okay, here we go, we can tweak it, or if we don't have to, if we call you with
Yep.
any questions and work on it that way. I think, yeah, give it a year to work.
Yeah, it's important to have that lead time too, because when you're evaluating someone formally and you're looking back a year, when it might not be construed as being entirely fair and open, because you're having a new system and you're looking back,
Create it
where
differently.
hopefully this will all be communicated to people, so everyone knows going forward that here's what we're going to do, and this is what your raises are going to be based on, and everyone's on the same page, basically.
I'm glad to hear that. That's where I was. Also, the idea that this is March. If we accept this as a concept, I think you've got to place all your employees in their locations, in the pay ranges, and then I think you've got to set up the process. And I do. I think what you hit it on the head. We're starting from scratch. This is the new process. So but that for this budget season, the one we're currently discussing, it's not merit-based.
Right.
It is prep-based, so that basically the entire team has a year to work on this process. So when the budget comes in July 1 of 17, we're ready to transition, and people have had an entire year working with the format this way, asking questions, going through training. I would ask, you said spend an hour. I would love you to spend, or we figure out how to do the training so that managers get a chance to do mock reviews. They practice with each other. They're, supervised when they do it, and, there's coaching going on. I mean, that's the type of training I was thinking about. I didn't expect it to be included in this package, but I think we need official training to do what you guys said, which is we don't want to scare the employees. We want to make them comfortable in these roles.
Right.
We want them to understand.
And there is confrontation at times.
Correct.
And they need to know how to handle that.
Mhm.
And it happens more often than you think.
Yes.
And I also think that on July 1st of 2016, every employee needs to understand where they are in their scale. If
Yep.
we're going to set up a scale system
Yep.
with, you can't just throw it out and say, oh, by the way. But you know a year ahead of time what you can expect a year from now based on where you are in the scale. And everybody it's all open.
It
So
shows
that-
how you got the skills. And
Correct.
you didn't just pull them out of the thin air, too.
And
Yeah.
and that type of a meeting, one-on-one, is an important meeting, the first meeting, to understand the process, to explain it individually, in private, right? Allow questions and answers. So that's the type of implementation that would have to happen between now and July 1st to make sure the managers are comfortable with this new, make sure they're trained, so on July 1, we're heading out into a,
Don, in your experience, what's best? Annual evaluations given to everybody at the same time, or date of hire? Because
That's-
in my organization, we do it once a year, all at the same time, and,
All
it's
at the
just
same time.
easier.
All
Well,
at the same time, do them all at the same time, once a
Right.
year.
right, once a year. You
Date of
take a
hire would
month,
be, date of hire would be,
It's a
no.
hard thing to
See, I
track.
think date of hire is more just because then you should have that, and you should be knowing where people are hired. You can't do that with hundreds, I understand that. But on the other hand, this is their anniversary, and you're expecting to say, okay, on the anniversary, I'm gonna have an evaluation done.
but we, historically, the anniversary we observe here is the, fiscal year anniversary.
Right.
And so, for efficiency of motion, I think alone, that you'd want to start and end in a certain timeline, do the evaluations annually.
No.
And regardless of what time of year somebody was hired. Otherwise, you're going to be, you'd have this thing open and running all year long.
Right.
And I think that, to me, from an efficiency standpoint, wouldn't make sense.
Right.
I'm sorry, what was your opinion on that? I'm sorry, we were answering the talk, and I didn't give you a
There were
chance to answer,
too many
sorry.
Dons here. I think.
And too many Dons in the interviews, I think, too. I wasn't part of the interviews, but everybody was named
I was trying to
Don.
think of what to say.
I totally agree with Don that the other thing to be concerned about is it's much easier when you're evaluating all at once. You can make comparisons, and if you do one now and another one 3 months later, you forget what you said about this one, and then you wind up perhaps not being at the end of the cycle as fair as you perhaps could have been if you were looking at everybody at the same time, because you'll make comparative judgments based on the dollars that you're gonna know what you have for a budget to work with, and make some determinations, so.
So this should get done fairly soon if we're gonna implement it for July 2017's budget.
Mhm.
Because we're gonna wanna know what those raises or merit pay should be going into the budget season
For next December.
for next
So,
December.
right, so you've got to start the process
Yeah.
now. Don?
I just wanted to point out that the employees, except for the employees that are here this evening and maybe watching at home, this is their first exposure to this. So that, you know, and I know we're not enacting, it's a workshop, but, and I wanted to talk with you about a presentation to the department heads at least, if that's possible.
Sure.
And so I just want to let you know that the employees don't have this.
Then they shouldn't have this.
No.
Right.
yet. I mean, this is a draft form
Right.
for us. My thoughts are, we need to go away. We need to come up with questions for Dawn. We need to come up with direction for Dawn. And at our April meeting, I think officially vote whether or not we are
Right.
going to move forward with this idea. Again, this is a workshop. It's questions and answers, not moving forward. I think there's thought process here, we've all expressed. And I think, you know, that, I mean, the general feeling seems to be a certain direction, right, which allows you to start talking in a certain direction without actually there having been a vote. But we can work towards what we anticipate with the two Dawns, and a vote, you know, 4 weeks from now.
What I'd like to do, if it's possible, is, if you're, with your consent, would be to have this Dawn come and make a presentation to the department heads at the department head meeting before the April meeting, so they're familiar with it.
I don't think we can give you that consent right now. I think
Okay.
you can choose what you do in the next month. I don't believe that we can officially give you any consent in a workshop.
Right, I'm not looking for an official vote.
We have another workshop.
If you
between
make a
now and
phone
the meeting.
call to Dawn and say, hey, Dawn, would you mind coming in and talking to my department heads?
Right.
That would be okay.
I just want to make sure that I'm in sync with the timeline and the process that you want.
Well, I think, yeah, we actually meet the end of March again.
We could do it on the 29th.
Yeah.
I mean, we could do it before April, but you need to be comfortable with what you've heard here. We'll get some questions together if there are any for Dawn, and then,
That's a workshop on the 29th with budget finance.
No, that's actually voting.
No,
we're gonna make well,
it's a joint meeting where you're discussing the budget between the finance.
but we can have
It's a workshop.
we can have a
Yeah.
very short, quick meeting though,
Okay.
if we had to.
I don't think,
Timing-wise, it probably doesn't matter that week to the next week.
you know,
so.
as a practical matter, this is now, since it's been presented, a public document. So I don't really think I need your consent. I'm just asking, I'm just telling you that that's what I'd like to do.
I think you've heard,
Yeah, positive about it. I'd like to proceed forward. I'm going to.
right,
That's what I'm gonna do.
right. You heard the direction of the board.
Got it.
We like this document.
I get it, yeah.
We told you how good it is.
I like how Dawn works this whole thing
Yeah.
out, talking out loud and going.
Well, that's what I'm trying to do, because I don't want to get ahead of, I'm trying not to get ahead of the board and the process, but I also want to make sure that everybody's,
But you
coming
need
along.
to start the process sooner
Correct.
rather than later.
Yeah,
That's what I'm gonna do.
because if you stall, then.
So we'll talk. We'll talk
All right,
about that.
any further questions for the workshop before I close it? Give us 5 minutes before the select board meeting. Dawn, you have any last words?
I don't. Thank you for
Thank
the
you so much.
opportunity to
Thanks,
present
Don.
this.
Really,
Thank
really
you.
appreciate
Yeah,
it.
this is
Thank you.
great work,
Appreciate
and it really spells out far more than I anticipated, so that's great.
Trying to figure out in your heads, but then seeing it on paper is totally different to understand it a lot better, yeah.
Can I have a motion to adjourn the workshop?
Motion adjourned.
All those in favor? Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Welcome to the Raymond Select Board meeting for Tuesday, the 8th of March, 2016. I want to welcome everybody. We have just finished a workshop, and we are now into our regularly scheduled meeting. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes of the previous meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Any suggestions, corrections, observations? Seeing none, all those in favor? Unanimous, 4-0. Next item on the agenda is CMP. Peggy Dwyer is here. Peggy, if you want to step up to the mic. Up at the podium.
You're pointing behind me.
Yes, I'm pointing behind you.
Okay. Well, actually, I'd like to introduce Gail Rice, who's also...
You got to do it all at the mic, because we're on TV.
We all have to go up to the.
We're on TV, so we need you to start over, introduce yourself, introduce whoever you want.
My name is Peggy Dwyer, and I would like to introduce Gail Rice from Central Maine Power Company, and also Jacob Farmer. Both of them are here to speak about different aspects of the project. Just a
Bill, is
quick
Peggy
summary.
close enough for you? Can you hear? Okay. So Bill is our videographer, and if he can't hear you, he'll let us know. And so everything should be done at the podium, if you can, for us. And take it away. The floor is yours.
Okay, I'm Gail Rice from CMP. Peggy introduced me already. We're here to talk a little bit about a piece of property that Peggy's, we'll explain it to you a little bit later, a piece of property that we're hoping to acquire as part of an upgrade that we want to do to help improve reliability in the town of Raymond. This work is part of a larger project to improve reliability throughout the Lakes Region area. This particular piece of the project helps improve reliability in Raymond, Wyndham, and Gorham. And this is something we do. We do system studies. We find that upgrades are needed, and so this is where we are. We're also going to have Jacob Farmer talk about a brief description of the current system and also the upgrades that we'd like to make to it. But before we do that, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the benefits. Obviously, the main reason behind doing this upgrade would be to improve reliability of the system throughout Raymond and some of the surrounding communities. But additionally, what these upgrades do is provide a bunch of benefits to the communities. First of all, whenever we put new infrastructure into a community, that helps to add to the community's tax base. We currently have about 10.7 million in assessed value to combined properties that we have here in Raymond. And this project, if it goes through as planned, will add to that considerably. I know you're probably all wondering how much, and it's difficult at this point to give you specifics on exactly what the increase in assessed value is going to be, but I can give you a couple of examples of similar projects that we've done in other towns. Where part of this project is a 34 kilovolt substation, and a similar substation, similar in size, similar vintage. We just finished building it a couple of years ago in the town of Lebanon in York County. That substation is assessed at $3.8 million. The new Webb's Mills Road substation would be of similar size. I don't know what the value would be, but it would add considerably to the tax base here in Raymond. We're also hoping to add a transmission line, a 34 kilovolt transmission line, and an existing transmission line of the same voltage. It's about 4.7 miles, and that is assessed at about $869,000. So that's almost that's about $200,000 a mile, give or take. So that's something that would also add to your tax base. So that's one of the benefits of this project. A second benefit is when construction is going on, local businesses will generally see an uptick in activity, and this could include the Village Donut Shop. It could be Sunset Variety, the Good Life Market. Many of your businesses right here in Raymond would likely see increased activity with people coming in, buying sandwiches, buying coffee. Perhaps if people are coming from out of town, working on it, or staying overnight, they might use lodging facilities in the area. So that helps the community as well. And finally, there are some recreational benefits to new transmission lines. Generally, our corridors, our rights-of-way, we allow certain passive recreation activity to happen on those rights-of-way, hiking, walking, bird watching, berry picking. We've had, people enjoy our rights-of-way and as part of their recreational activities. And some of our bigger rights-of-way, if there is local interest, we've even had snowmobile clubs get licensed to put trails on those, work with the Department of Conservation in Maine to use those areas for snowmobile trails. So there are lots of benefits to upgrades in addition to the obvious, which is a more reliable service to the area. So now I'm going to, Jacob is going to come up and show you a little bit about the system that serves you now, how that is configured, and he'll also talk about what we hope to add in terms of substations and transmission facilities and so forth.
We do have the ability, if you have it on computer, we can actually put it on the screen and we can put it on TV.
Sure.
And we're happy to just take a pause while you set it up. I think if we know where the cord is,
Good, yeah.
Bill, can you help?
Yep.
If that would help your presentation, I'm guessing it would.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Jeff,
I have
otherwise we
copies
need
for
to
you guys.
share a few of those.
Just share with Jeff.
Hi, Peggy. How are you?
How are you?
Good.
I brought a piece of my little cat.
All right.
I can be. Everyone.
I wrote to our mutual friend and she told me to give you a hard time.
Excellent.
I'll tell you the other quote off camera.
But that's nice. You better, ask my husband. So why did you guys get rid?
Bill, I think you got to turn the, Bill?
Yeah.
I think you got to turn the thing on too. Oh, do you have a remote control? Oh, look at that. This is getting fancy in here. I usually have to reach up and push the button.
Are we ready, Chase?
I'm gonna hit the lights.
I used to be
Not
told.
quite.
Okay.
I used to be told that was part of my job because nobody else could reach, but
We knew we kept you on here for a reason.
that's right. There is currently a snowmobile trail on the transmission line that goes through Morgan Meadow.
Yep, I thought so.
And
I think that's a substation.
there's one very interesting hill on it that makes it exciting at times. The power line goes over it just fine. Inexperienced snowmobile drivers don't always make it.
There's gotta be,
Can't be any worse than the one that's up Notice Field. That one's like
this one would be.
that. There's one up there that's unbelievable.
I dove off as my sled rolled.
Well, that could be worse.
I went up like this and everything gave way and
Goes right to Florida,
yeah.
Oh, it would cut across.
I didn't do it quite so fast the next time.
Yeah, it sounds worse than the one up there, which is pretty bad.
Oh, look.
Are we ready?
All right, if you would introduce yourself again when you're ready and take
course.
it away.
So my name's Jacob Farmer. I'm a project manager at CMP. And what I have for you guys tonight is a map that shows the majority of what we're calling the Lakes Region project. The area in particular to Raymond will consist of a new substation on Webbs Mills Road that we're calling currently the Webbs Mills substation.
Where on Webster?
Yep, I'll show you as soon as the PDF opens. I'll be able to show
that's
that
not
to you.
That's not our wonderful, I thought the water was a little vast for our
Yeah,
community.
that's the
Made it
Kennebec.
tricky.
It's beautiful.
I took that while flying recently.
You can fly?
I'm a student pilot,
Oh.
so
Thought like you
not
had
on my
wings.
own.
Oh, Superman.
Okay, where on
All right.
Webbs Mill Road?
So as we
I live on it.
pull it up here, I don't know if you can see where my my mouse is.
Yeah.
Yeah, with the
Yeah.
green is.
I can zoom in a little bit here. So where that point is the Webb's Mills substation. What we're proposing to put the new substation at, and what that substation would consist of is 34 kilovolt power. That would reduce down to 12.5 and the distribution level power. As we see on the map, to the left going north on parallel to Meadow Road is an existing 34 line that comes from the 115 substation in Raymond. That one, you can see right where the route is, that white pin. There's the existing Raymond 34.5 yard. We looked at that location at the time, and due to the pipeline and just the real estate constraints, there isn't room to expand the current substation that's there for another breaker, for another bay of the substation. So
Jacob, can I
Yes.
interrupt you just for a second? For those folks at home who may not be picking this out, if you're driving down Webb's Mills Road or 85 towards Route 302, which is labeled here as Roosevelt Trail, there are current transmission lines that come across Route 85, maybe 3/4 of a mile before you get to the intersection of 302. And I'm guessing that's that black line is the existing things. So if your pin is, if I'm accurate with your pin, it would be on the west side of Webb's Mills Road where the new proposed substation is,
correct.
and probably where those transmission lines are currently going across Webb's Mills Road. Is that also correct?
Yep.
That will help, I think, for folks.
Yeah, okay.
That will help orientate folks. So it's 3/4 of a mile from the Good Life Market.
Right.
Right, is it right where that dirt area is that they were gonna put a subdivision in there and they didn't put a subdivision in there?
Just before that, where those power lines cross, correct.
And when you're talking a substation, are you talking kind of like there's one out on 121 right now where it's got the fenced in with all the little, nice little machinery?
Yeah. So let me.
Thank you, Jacob, for just allowing me to help people orient.
Of course.
We think of it as 85 and 302, most of the locals, as opposed to the names, so it doesn't, the names don't always translate.
So I stick out.
You're correct, but
So let me, this is obviously a much larger scale, but when we talk about a substation, this is just an example. This is one that CMP recently constructed. It's much larger. This has all the way up to 345 kilovolt, 115, which is the next step down, and then 34.5. So the 34.5, you can't even see in this picture. It's such a small comparison, but this just for an
I
example.
was gonna say, that'd be awfully hard to fit on
Yeah.
a piece of property.
Right.
So,
right.
Jacob,
Yes.
are you familiar with the substation that is on 121 or Meadow Road? Do you know that?
I haven't stopped by there
Okay.
yet.
I was trying to give people an idea of what size it might be, because
Yeah.
the locals would know that, so.
Yep. Pretty much the new substation and even the 115 would fit. The 115 line that at this substation, there's 4 bays, so it's pretty much this area where my mouse is hovering over. So
And
it's
that's gonna be at the end, like towards the road, on the road type thing, so it'll be seeing everything, it's not set back in at all,
it's not planned to at this point that I know of to set back in. I haven't passed the property itself to see what the trees are like, whether it's something where it could be set back in on the property. I know we have option more than enough land for this substation, so there may be room for that, but let me.
No, that's okay. It helps folks orient.
Yeah, and I can actually, if this works, I can pull up the Google Earth. So this is sort of what we're thinking of where the substation, the Webbs Mills substation, would go off from Webbs Mills Road. The existing transmission line, like we just talked about, does do this turn, this downward turn to the south. So it would utilize the existing corridor, the right-of-way, where the transmission line is now, the 115.
Yes.
I was thinking you were on the left-hand side, so you're right, just bucking right up to the power lines that's already there, the open space.
Yep.
I was thinking you were down a little bit further on the left, tucked, okay.
Yep.
It's in the current, right, so it's in the current right-of-way tree, so we're
Yeah.
used to driving by it all the time.
Right,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. And what we have, if I zoom out a little bit, see if I can't. So currently the existing substation
Keep going.
this is the 34 kilovolt, so the current smaller substation, which is what we would be replacing, is right here
So,
as
is the
reference.
plan to demolish that and remove it?
Yep, yeah, so the plan would be to remove the entire substation, put it back to just gravel or grass, depending on what the permitting and needs are. So that entire substation would go away. The transmission line that currently feeds into this substation would continue through it down to the Webbs Mills new location, because that is fed through the Raymond 115 substation where it is now. And
That one was upgraded just a few years ago. The one
Yeah.
up in Casco.
Yep.
Yep.
And if I zoom out a little bit here, just to give a little bit more of a bigger picture, and we can definitely go back into the details. The new substation is located here. The transmission line that we're proposing, which would go through the property that we're here to discuss tonight, is this green line that we see, is where we're proposing to put the transmission line. And as we see, this bluish line that we have here comes from the existing Raymond 115. The new line would eventually connect up to that and use the existing right-of-way to go over to what we're calling the New Gloucester substation. So part of this project and the need for the reliability or what system planning part of CMP determined was from Surwick substation, which is over east some, over in the New Gloucester area, currently has 345, all the voltage levels at the substations. What they're proposing is to put another bay of 115 to duplicate the 115 kilovolt transmission line into New Gloucester. So currently there's one line that runs from Surwick to the Raymond 115 line, and what they're proposing is putting an intermediate substation in New Gloucester and adding a second line. So if for whatever reason one of the lines is down for maintenance at Surwick going to Raymond and they have to kill the power there's that second line that could still feed power to the Raymond area, to the new Webbs Mill. So instead of having just the one line from Surwick to Raymond, it would actually provide two lines. One that feeds through New Gloucester into the Raymond substation, the 115, and one that at the New Gloucester substation goes down through the new corridor right directly to the Webbs Mills, which is proposed. So as part of the project, there'd be a little bit of work at Surwick. What we're calling New Gloucester substation is is also what we call a greenfield substation. So there's nothing there yet. So it'd be from the ground up at that substation as well. And that would essentially, the two transmission lines from Surrowick and the one to Raymond at 115 level and a 34 kilovolt line down to Webb's Mills would be constructed in New Gloucester. So we'd still have the one line that previously went from Surrowick to Raymond, and then we would have the 34 kilovolt that went from the 115 substation to the Raymond that will just cross over that into the new substation. And then as part of the project, there's an existing substation down south that doesn't feed any power, but there would be work that would be tied to that. And then from the north of Raymond, part of this project is also a new substation at what we're calling Kimball Road in Bridgeton. So Bridgeton and just north, I believe it's Harrison. I can zoom out a little and show you. So there's one of the major transmission lines that feeds this area is from the north, and it's from this substation up at Kimball Road. And part of this project is to rebuild a portion of the Kimball Road substation and the Bridgeton substation. So it's not only work that's just focused in this area, but there's other needs that they're technically connected, and power does flow from the Kimball substation down this way. So there's enhancements that'll happen in that area as well. And also the primary benefit as far as the local work in this area is really that new line from Surrowick to New Gloucester, which will allow a second feed of power to this area that then gets transferred down to the 12.45 kilovolt level, which is the distribution level.
So are we talking more reliability, less power outages?
That's
Because
the intent.
I am on that Bridgeton line.
Yep.
Well, because I live on the Casco-Raymond border.
Okay.
So my power comes off Bridgeton and we're always out of power.
Yep.
That's why I have a generator at my house.
Yep.
Well done.
I'd love to say you'd have no outages.
You
We
can't
would
say
all-
that.
Right,
You can't say that.
You know this.
But yeah, let's say, for example, something happens at the Kimball Road substation and they can't supply power to the current Raymond 34 because of that. With the New Gloucester substation, if there's distribution that comes from Raymond to your area, there'd still be that option from another.
You'd have a circle.
You'd have a circle. Even we're not doing any upgrades to the Raymond 115 as part of this project, besides name changes and semantic type things. But there is more reliability to the area and to the distribution level, because you could have outages in multiple places on different lines, and you have a new source. So it should help.
Done.
The only thing worse than being on the Bridgeton line is not, if you're in Raymond, because our power where I am is fed in, as I understand it, from Lewiston, Poland, and that's even much more unreliable, if that's possible, than the Bridgeton line.
Yeah.
So naturally, my question, and the question that my neighbors would have, is what does this do for that part of town? You know, the Spiller Hill, North Raymond Road, that area, because we on average have much more outages and longer outages than the Bridgeton line. I envy the people on the Bridgeton line. My public works director is at the bottom of the hill. He's on the Bridgeton line. He, relatively to me, has power, it seems like, all the time. Joe says that is not actually true, but I mean, we spend lots of time without power, and so I'm wondering any redundancy effect for that part of town.
Yeah, I'm definitely not the expert on how the distribution is fed and where it's fed through, but why this project came to really is that system planning, a group within Central Maine Power, they're their job really is to see where there's issues with power flow, where there's need for improvements. So this project, because of load problems and maintenance criteria, they saw a need to create redundancy. So this is the proposed solution to that. So I think any line distribution that's fed through, this area, the Raymond circuit, currently would still be fed through the same circuit, the same general area. The only difference is that there's another line that they could potentially take load off from. So if say the New Gloucester substation goes down for whatever reason, they need to perform maintenance on the transformer, you'd still have the tie from the north and the tie from the south. So it should help. It should still help the same in that aspect.
Now, oh, go ahead.
No, what happens to the landowners that are abutting against it? Who talks to them? How does that whole thing work?
Yeah, so Peggy's really the expert there. We sent her. She's a great with relationships, and I'll let her speak to that. I don't know if you want to just stand up, I guess, and answer that.
Peggy, you can sit
Right
next to
right
him,
next
or you
to
can
him.
stand at the podium. That way, at least we get you a mic.
Well, I know the
We may not turn the lights on, but
It was kind of
Do you
funny
want the
when you
lights
were
on
pointing up
still?
at the ceiling earlier. You were saying you have to talk to
To the
him. I was
mic,
thinking
right.
like you'd made an earlier reference to God, and I thought, wow, this is.
that's Bill. Bill is
Bill.
God today.
So you asked about landowners and
Yeah.
our landowner our approaches. The goal for CMP was to acquire the entire 6.5 miles of greenfield, the new corridor, through voluntary purchases from willing landowners. So it's been several years that we've been going around and talking to people, knocking on doors, and we have most of that line under option at this point. We have, there are 2 landowners in in Raymond that we're still working with. We have the town of Raymond itself and 1 landowner in Gray. But otherwise, we've acquired that corridor of 100 feet wide.
So you're saying, all right, so you've got that corridor, but what happens to okay, and this may be a land use thing, so you acquire this property, but the person that lives next to that property, and it's not going on their property, has to live next to this thing, but they really don't have, I guess, a say in it then, right?
Well, they will, because this is kind of a preliminary meeting. We have the cart a little bit before the horse in terms of coming to the town with a presentation. You're going to see CMP again when we come to our permitting stage. We're going to be applying for a permit to build this thing, at which point there's the opportunity for public input.
Okay.
That's where everybody else gets to.
So does the town grant you the permit, or is it a PUC permit?
My understanding is that it's both. There's state, local, and federal permits, right? Yeah. Yeah.
No, okay. And I know the snowmobilers, and people snowmobile right through there all the time. There's paths through there.
And ATVs?
Yeah, is that gonna affect that by, they can only go so close to it, or?
Well, yeah, yes, I would say ATVs are not permitted on CMP corridors without a license to a specific
Trail
club.
network. Yep.
And the snowmobiles are all licensed under the master license with the Department of Conservation. So if there's an authorized trail, then that's how that would be licensed.
Okay.
ATVs and four-wheel drive vehicles are not permitted on the corridor.
Okay, I just,
Well, they're always going up and down that.
Yes,
street.
anybody
Yeah.
who's an absentee landowner has problems
Right.
with people using property.
but I know the snowmobilers do, they groom it and everything else, that's why, yeah.
Then it's a club. Then it's a club. If they're
Okay.
grooming it, it's likely to
Okay.
be club property.
I guess I just don't wanna say yes to something that we're making a decision for something
Right, and so I
else.
wanted to be clear about what we're asking for today. What we're talking about today is a specific proposal to acquire an option. the right to buy it later,
Okay.
should this project be permitted. So we're looking to acquire the right to buy a strip of land in the event that this entire project is approved. And you'll get another chance to learn about the project and to have the, the public process that goes along with any building permit application down the road.
So
That would go to
So you're not
planning
approving the
board.
project.
yeah, that's the planning board.
No.
That's, yeah,
Yeah,
that would,
just
that would go to
the
the
sale of the land.
time frame, Peggy? I mean, if everything went smooth?
I have just a preliminary time frame right now. So one thing, the first thing that we internally have to do is file a CPCN application with the regulatory. So even though internally we've said, hey, this is what we feel the best option is, we still have to file with the PUC and ISO.
What's a CPCN, please?
It's it's
It's an acronym.
yeah. But I'm drawing my
One
head.
that we want to understand anyway?
Certificate for public convenience and necessity.
Right.
Yes.
I
I know that
never
we use
say it.
acronyms very loosely, so.
So we have to file for that, and that typically takes, we say about a year. It could take 6 months, it could take 3 years. There's really no set time frame for that. It's out of our control, but essentially what that does is it gives us approval that the upgrades that we're suggesting, make sense, that there's no other alternative that would better fit the needs and the purpose of the project, whether it's what we call NTA or non-transmission alternatives, say generation or wind, just alternatives that may fit the criteria of the project without producing new transmission or substations. So there's a lot of work that goes into that, a lot of analysis, and then, so say the project gets awarded next year at that level. In the meantime, what we would be doing, say this spring, is a vernal pool analysis.
We've been there.
We knew that.
So
We know that one.
So that's our plan on the new corridor where it's greenfield, there's not an existing right-of-way, is to have rights of entry from all of the people that we've optioned their land, to have permission to walk the corridor and mark where those vernal pools might be. And then essentially from there, we'd probably be in permitting and engineering through the end of next year, through the end of 2017. And we would start construction probably in Q2 of 2018.
If everything goes
If
well.
everything goes well.
Okay.
And that's a fairly optimistic schedule, but something that could be realistic as long as there's no major obstacles that come up. And construction would go for about a year, maybe a year and a half, so it would be towards the end of Q4 2019 that construction would go through. Now, this might not all happen all at once, depending on permitting, depending on other project needs. We might do the transmission line first, start the clearing for the right-of-way before we start to develop the substation. So it could go concurrently, or it could be one after another. But that's sort of the plan at this point. So the project, in theory, would be completed end of 2019, maybe the beginning of 2020.
You still need your generator.
For a while. I'll be on Social Security by the time they get done.
Yes. All
I'm still
right.
not clear where it is,
Where
where the proposed.
the line is?
site
Zoom out, zoom.
It's right out in Webb's Mill.
Well,
When
I
you're
live
going
in-
to the Good Life Market, half a mile before the Good Life,
It's on the power lines, the big open space on 85.
is power lines that cross right
Where
there.
is Plains Road?
Oh, God, way the
Oh,
other end.
you're,
Way up.
yeah, way up. Yeah, you're not even
See, there's
close.
See the Brown
there's
Road?
Mill Street.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
We cross the Brown Road, Gore Road, and Egypt Road on our way up to North Raymond Road.
Okay,
Sam, right above the green,
I got
you
you.
see the ball fields?
Yep, I do,
Those are the ball fields on Mill Street,
yes.
just to the north, right there.
This area.
Yep,
Yep, I see him.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So this is just a rough approximation, this rectangle that we have here of, you know, that's not to scale the size of the substation, that's just the general area. The substation would be significantly less than that box. but-
And it's fenced in like all of your stuff, so
Yep.
snowmobilers going by are gonna have a different path maybe than they have now because they can't go through the fence.
Right.
Right. Yep.
That's gonna be
Other,
weird seeing that.
other questions for location before we get into the location of the land we're talking about? Do you have a slide of the land? Do you have our slide that we have in our packet of
I
our
don't know if
land?
I have information on the KMZ,
Mhm.
if I can pull that up.
Sure,
It's-
let's.
So basically, we call the
We
site,
can
Yeah.
show it, yeah.
right,
Yeah.
we call the
I'll
site
just
you're
show
looking
you
at is
first.
our old, it's our old landfill on Patricia Avenue. That's what we call
Mhm.
it.
Yeah, I'd seen it referred to as the sludge site before, so that's what I
Correct.
had been calling
Right.
it for most of my project.
We recently looked at that
Just
land for a recreational
For the
field.
I
driving
think if I
range.
zoom out now. Should be good, right?
Yes, that's all right.
All right.
Oh, good, yeah, that'll do it.
Just to make sure that we take out any unneeded information. So if we start back at the substation, I'll zoom in a little, zoom in some here. So the land,
It's that funky shape.
That's your
one.
is
lot.
this
That's our
funky
lot
shape.
right
That's,
there.
that's the property owned by the town.
So the cleared area there that your mouse is on, shaped
Yep.
like a B,
Yep.
the lower part of the B was I believe, the transfer station, and the upper part was the sludge.
That's correct.
And there's currently a cell tower there. One of those buildings is a cell tower.
Yep.
So your substation and all that other green is just gonna be wires, it's not gonna be.
Correct. Yeah, so from the mouse, if we look at the Webb's Mills Road, the substation's on the north side of it, northwest. Then coming across the road from there through the rest of this is pretty much a 100-foot wide swath.
And
where the-
currently you haven't,
You already have.
You already
transmission
have it.
lines there.
some lines, the blue line
Along
is
the blue
already
line,
existing.
yes.
Yeah,
That's right.
this small area, that's already existing, so it's just a second line that would be put in that area.
Right, so
From-
there we acquired an extra 50 feet to accommodate, we already had some excess width there.
Mhm.
So, but the whole remainder of the line is going to be a 100-foot wide corridor. And it shows, sort of slightly disjointed. There's some discrepancies between the town of Raymond's mapping and the town of Gray's
Right.
mapping. But what you see is about what we're talking about.
So you're talking about right on our property line.
Right on that northeast line. And it's a little bit more than 100 feet in that, because you see that your line is not regular. It's 100 feet at the narrowest space. But we tried to make, we figured that alignment on the northeast boundary would be the least impact to the remainder of your lot.
Correct.
Provided we can locate there after the vernal pool studies are done. That would be the ideal situation.
Sure you don't wanna buy that whole lot? You get
Is it the
cheap.
same
Yes,
price?
I'm pretty sure.
Be a good place for a substation.
Or a softball field.
Yeah.
Or a driving range.
On the driving range.
We have one comparable, we have the tower at, 900K there for the little postage stamp size, so you do the math, it's very cheap for the whole thing.
Excellent.
So we're not going to talk price in this session. We'll go into executive session to do that off camera. So anything else you want to talk about as your presentation for the public?
Do you have a picture of the structure? Single floor, do you have got one of those, or cross-section, well,
I do have, I don't have internet currently, but I do have,
You talking about the substation, Peggy, or?
just the structures themselves, because the plan is for single pole structures, so it's not
Oh,
even an
the
H-frame, it's just
structure.
a one.
You're talking about the line, the line
right,
itself?
The line itself,
Thank you.
60 feet tall.
Because currently going through the blue corridor, you've got a H,
That's big,
Configuration,
yes,
yeah.
that's 115.
so it'd be half that, basically.
They're 60 feet tall. It's just, so instead of the H-frame
Right.
with the support structures in the middle, it's just a singular 2 phases on one and 1 phase on the opposite side. They're,
I have a paper copy, but nothing that I can
That's
show on
okay.
the
sorry,
screen.
That's good.
sorry, it was,
I think
That was
Peggy's,
thought anyway.
Peggy's explanation of,
Yeah.
of single versus double gives us an idea.
Yeah.
Other questions before we wrap up the public presentation? Anybody from the public have a question? Don, you have a question?
No, I was going to ask you if you were ready for the lights.
I think we're ready for the lights.
yeah. So
Oh, that's, yeah, so the
that's a
hanging,
cross-section, and that's what the
right,
structure
so the
looks
hang,
like.
it's a hanging, single pole hanging, I can picture that now. Right, so it's that style, as opposed to the H style.
Good.
Yep. So that helps your question, Teresa, is what it would look like. So it's a single pole power line, not an H power line.
Okay.
And it's about 60 feet in height.
Wooden,
Wood.
Oh, it's a wood pole?
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, you can, I think that's for us now.
Yeah, I'll just keep one, but they
Yep,
just
you can put that.
put that in your
with the other
scrapbook.
And that's CMP's smallest design. This is the smallest design that we're currently building.
one. Here, Don, have two.
There's one over like bus passes.
Yep. Any further questions?
Need a motion?
Motion to go in executive session, please.
I'll make a motion to go into executive session under Title I, 405-6, and I assume we have an attorney here?
We do
No,
not.
we do not, but I would say, given the fact that we have all staff and involved CMP officials and our contract planning person, maybe it makes sense to have the executive session here.
Yes. All those in favor?
6A.
6A, thank you.
And I don't know, are we,
Seconded by Teresa. Welcome back. May I have a motion to come out of executive session?
Motion to come out of executive session.
Second.
All those in favor? It's unanimous, 4-0.
I'll make a motion to authorize the town manager to negotiate the option with CMP on selling land.
Second.
All those in favor? Thank you all for coming. Don will be
Thank you
in,
very much.
Don will be in touch, or you'll be in touch, and we'll proceed down the road.
All right.
All right. Super. Very good. Thank you.
all right, bye.
When I went, she went. Or I just wanted to cut.
Everybody's leaving. Bye, guys. Bye. Careful.
The next item on our posted agenda was item C, annual appointments. I have been informed that we only need to do it every 2 years, and this is the off year, so we're done with C. Moving on to item D, proposed ordinance amendments for town meeting warrant. Chris?
Actually,
Chris, you introduce yourself, and then you
Yes.
take over.
I'm Chris Hansen, the Code Enforcement Officer for the town of Raymond, and I brought these amendments forward from the planning board meeting that we had. And this is Stephanie Carver from GP Cog. Anybody out there doesn't know who she is. She's our ordinance writer and drafter, and she worked with Jim Seymour, the town planner, and myself, and the planning board to prepare this packet for you tonight. And where she prepared it, I'm going to let her kick it off and make a brief description on the articles, and we'll take any questions after
We have
that.
the Cliff Note versions of these.
I was just going to say,
this is the Cliff Note version.
so
Okay.
Stephanie, I'm going to point it out, and Bill, you can do a pan. As we've done in the past, we normally would look for public comment. There was no public here tonight. We usually follow recommendations from staff and our planning board, so you can do your brief Cliff Notes version, as Joe suggested, and we'll go from there. This is a first look to us, which then would be our job to refer it to a public meeting for public comment further.
So the planning board has already signed off on these.
Yes, that's correct.
Excellent. Great. Stephanie, take it away.
It's easy.
Okay. So I think the best thing for me to do is I'm going to follow through in your packet, and Sue organized this by item. It can be a little confusing because articles are also mentioned in the ordinance and in the warrant, so I'll try to be as clear as possible. I'll read the description for each one, and then if you have questions, feel free to follow up with that. So item 1, which is Article 2 on the version of the warrant that the planning board approved. The description here is basically that this would be set aside for additional consideration. It was a mapping task that the planning board decided to set aside and re-examine later. Moving on to item 2, which is Article 3 of the version of the planning board's approved warrant. Is shoreland zoning changes. And to sum up the description, basically the Maine DEP completed its rulemaking process, introduced some new reforms to Chapter 1000 guidelines, which are the foundation for the municipal zoning, shoreland zoning ordinance model that Raymond's ordinance is formed around. And those amendments have been incorporated into your current shoreland zoning ordinance. They include some updating and revising of definitions, changing the criteria for expansion of non-conforming structures, basing it on footprint and height rather than the previous volume, clearing vegetation and revegetation, removal of hazard, storm damaged and dead trees, allowing the CEO to grant variances related to ADA issues, and adjustments of certain culvert sizing. There are also several definitions that were proposed and some reformatting throughout the ordinance and the definition section. Move on to item 3. And that item is Article 4 on the planning board's approved warrant version. And that description is that the town staff recommended changes regarding how stormwater calculations are determined for smaller projects and the level of review that they receive among town staff. Moving on, item 4, which is Article 5. That is the similar terms driveway and driveway entrance have been refined and clarified in both the shoreline provisions and the land use ordinance. We also added a second we added a new definition, secondary access, to that as well.
How much of this had to do with this whole Fry Island thing? I mean, you know, we're still getting letters.
Only a couple of the definitions were refined.
Okay.
And
Driveway was one of them?
driveway was one, secondary entrance was one,
Okay.
because the appeals board had determined, they felt the meaning of entrance was one thing, and the planning board felt it was something else.
Okay.
But the rest of these are, the shoreline zoning provision changes were
Are
all,
DEP.
they're mandated by the DEP.
Okay.
When you get to the definition, we've cleaned these up in both the land use and the shoreline zoning so that they relate to each other better in the ordinance.
Okay.
Because sometimes you have a land use issue when you're going through a site plan review and a shoreline zoning issue, and we've matched them up.
Okay.
Okay, so item 5, Article 6. These amendments are proposed to Section 16 of the shoreline zoning provisions in Article 6 of the land use ordinance. They state that the decisions of the planning board will not be reviewed by the Board of Appeals, but rather go directly to Superior Court. And they also clarify that the Board of Appeals shall review a decision of the code enforcement officer in a de novo hearing, which basically means starting afresh. And that they would reconsider the application independent of the CEO's decision. The proposed language also corrects the time period for appeals to Superior Court to 45 days so that it's consistent with state statute.
Okay, so, if I may,
Go right ahead, Joe.
why are we taking the appeals process away from the zoning board of appeals?
We're not. We're only doing it for planning board decisions.
So you can't appeal a planning board decision to the
appeals.
zoning board. You have to go to Superior Court.
where most cases end up anyway. What we realized is now you've got attorneys representing the planning board, we had attorneys representing the appeals board, you've got appellants, it just turned into a circus, and there's no precedent in the state for this. So Jim Kakafikas, the attorney we hired to represent the Board of Appeals, recommended that we make this change. Our town attorneys agreed with it, and so did the planning board.
It makes a whole lot more sense.
What you don't
Because
want-
if you go to the zoning board of appeals, you're starting all over again.
Right.
This
and
is
the-
in line with what most communities throughout the state are doing.
And the other thing is, you don't want to have one board regulating another
Right,
board. It's really just
exactly.
not a good idea.
Right.
But the zoning board of appeals will still hear administrative hearings about my decisions. They'll hear variances, and they'll hear setback reductions. They're still going to do the same thing. I have only known of one planning board issue in this town that went to the appeals board, and that was the last one you spoke of.
Yeah. Okay. All right, good.
So this really brings us more in compliance with the rest of the state.
Consistent.
Consistency, thank you, that's a much better word.
Next item 6. This is pertaining to fees, and it basically changes, okay, so the town staff is proposing that any reference to specific fees be removed from the land use ordinance, subdivision regulations, and the fire protection ordinance, and replaced with language referring to the fee schedule. In your miscellaneous ordinances, you actually have a fee schedule ordinance, and language has also been added to that miscellaneous ordinance that states all fees shall be included in the town fee schedule. Any fee in the fee schedule shall supersede those found in the ordinances.
It just reflects that you guys determine the fee schedule.
Right.
It just clears that up.
Yeah, and it also makes it easier, I would assume, to update those fees
Exactly.
at that point. Item 7, Article 8 on the warrant. There's a little typo in this, so just pay attention to the first description. The second one, it was an error on my part. The language is amended from lot coverage to lot structural coverage to better describe the intent of the term, which is to describe the portion of a lot actually covered by structures. This affects the land use ordinance, Section Q, Article 12, definitions, and that's it. Any questions? Next one is item 8. And item 8, Article 9 on the warrant.
Item 7, you mean? Article 8?
I'm sorry, item Item
Article 8.
Item 8, Article 9 on the warrant.
We
Did I
don't have
skip
that
one?
one. We don't have, oh, is it part of the same? All right, there it is, down on the bottom.
Flows.
It's just not in my, it's not in my summary write-up on the side, sorry. Not your
all right.
doing. You're good. Keep going.
Anyway, so this item pertains to modifications and changes to the current Town of Raymond Fire Protection ordinance, and it includes adding fees, fee costs, code references, reformatting and deleting repetitive texts, changing the town's fire address, and are primarily administrative in nature. There are a few notable changes that include added criteria requiring the review of fire alarm system installation or alteration, and the requirement of smoke detectors and carbon monoxide detectors with the installation of a solid fuel burning device. That's it?
Great, thank you.
Questions?
Already asked them as we went along.
So from here, our goal would be to have a motion from this board to send this to public hearing, which would happen at our next select board meeting. We would have the public hearing, is that correct?
And Sue can probably speak to this, but my understanding is that it needs to go to the printer. There was a March deadline that we were working under.
April.
Oh, it's April, okay.
Yeah, in order to get it
Yeah.
ready for town meeting. So I think we double
First
check
meeting in April.
our select board meeting in April.
Right.
So we'll have it then. So we want to add anything to that schedule?
I'm sorry?
Do you want to add anything to that schedule, or we're good? Can I have a motion?
Make a motion.
Motion by Sam, seconded by Joe. All those in favor? Unanimous, 4-0. Thank you for all your work on these.
Yeah.
I know they
Yeah,
can,
thanks.
the wording can be very tedious.
Team effort.
Anything else for us, Chris?
I'm all set.
All right,
Thank you.
go get some rest. Next item on the agenda is public comment. Next item on the agenda is selectmen comment. Anybody got anything to say? Wow.
Is that a wow because of quiet during this time, or is it a wow because we're
Thank
moving
you.
along?
John, town manager report and communication.
Okay, rapid fire version. Confirm dates for upcoming regular meetings. April 12th, May 10th, June 21st being the new one, third Tuesday of June due to June 14th being election day. So upcoming regular Board of Selectmen meetings.
So, April 12th,
May 10th,
May 10th,
June 21st.
June 21st. I don't need to put that one on my calendar, do I?
I guess not.
Is that correct? The elections will have happened.
That is correct unless you decide to
Have a
take out papers.
major change of heart, I guess.
June 21st?
Tuesday, June 21st, because Tuesday, June 14th is election day. And it's also Flag Day.
Why are we meeting June 21st when we have town meeting on the 7th?
There are always things that need to happen before the end of the fiscal year that need the selectmen to approve.
You have a conflict, Joe? Would you like to see it a different day?
No. I'm just not putting it on my calendar right now. I'm good for April and May.
All right.
Okay,
Done.
reminder of upcoming budget meetings, March 29th, final joint meeting with Budget Finance Committee, Board of Selectmen Budget Finance Committee on March 29th. April 5th, Selectmen meet to vote on the budget. April 11th, Budget Finance Committee meets to vote on the budget. Reminder of upcoming election schedule.
What was that? Hang on, April 5th is the budget vote, right?
Selectmen budget vote. April 11th is the Budget Finance Committee
Right.
budget vote.
And then we have a selectmen meeting on the 12th?
Yes.
What's going on with these meetings?
Those should be one and the same. April should be one and the same.
So do you want to move the selectmen's meeting to April 5th?
Yes. That's what we did last year.
Correct.
It was one meeting. We didn't have two meetings.
Because we're having the workshop at the end of the month, then we vote the next meeting, and that, yes. So I would agree. It should be the 5th.
Okay.
So select board is now the 5th, not the 12th.
And I mean, even if we need to start at 6 o'clock.
Mm-hmm.
I think you'll know better about that after your meeting on the 29th.
Right.
how close you are to this, I guess.
Though on the 29th, it doesn't leave a lot of notice for the public if you change the time of the meeting.
We're
have a
gonna,
week.
yeah, we're 7 o'clock.
You
Okay.
Sorry, I missed that one. That's my fault.
I'm looking at all the marks on Joe's calendar, and he's thinking, how can I free some of these up?
Okay. Sorry, Don.
Okay, reminder of upcoming election schedule, March 21st, Monday, nomination papers are available. May 2nd, Monday, nomination papers due back at the town office to the town clerk by 4 p.m. May 25th, RSU 14 budget vote at Wyndham High School. June 7th, annual town meeting. June 14th, primary and municipal elections. And we have an upcoming holiday, Monday, April 18th, Patriots' Day. Is that enough dates for you?
What time is town meeting?
I don't believe it's been set.
6.
I won't be there.
So we can do it anytime. We had a little bit of feedback that we scheduled it at 6 last time. It was a little early, so I'm gonna push it to 6:30.
Makes sense.
Town
Whatever
meeting.
works for you.
Thanks, Joe. You get this one off.
Wait a second, that's what I'm saying, you're not gonna be at town meeting?
No.
We rescheduled the town meeting for you.
No, we didn't. We did last
You
year.
asked to do it earlier this year, different, you did change it.
I asked to do it on Wednesday like we did last year.
Right.
And Lonnie couldn't do it on Wednesday because of his
Mike
anniversary.
said no. So I said, okay.
So I kept it on Tuesday. I had to defy somebody.
Good.
So I chose Joe.
I won't take it personally.
So town meeting at 6:30. Sue, you good?
Yes.
It's all you.
I think I'm through. We're down to the treasurer's warrant, right?
Yep. Say I'm gonna do the treasurer's warrant.
No, you can do them.
I'll give it to her so she can
You're
do that.
much quicker than I am.
Make a motion to accept the treasurer's warrant dated 3/8/2016 in the amount of $117,527.18.
Second.
Those in favor? Unanimous. Is that the only one, Teresa?
Yeah.
Nice.
You're doing payroll.
Can I have a motion to go on executive session, please?
I'll make a motion to go into executive session under Title I and RSA subsection 4056A, discuss the town manager's annual review.
Second.
All those in favor? Unanimous. Can I have a motion to come out of executive session?
Come out of executive session.
I suck at that.
All those in favor? Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Well, hey,
Oh, I'll make a motion to extend the town manager's contract by 1 year.
Second.
1 year.
extend it.
By 1 year.
Second. Yeah, that's all we.
Second, is there a discussion? Is there clarification needed, Mr. Gifford?
You extend it by 1 year. He
Oh, in
still
other
has
words,
3 years.
he still has 3 years.
To get to the,
Okay.
to get what we talked about.
Okay, good.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Thank you.
Motion adjourned.
We're adjourned.
Okay.